Thank you all so much for joining. As always, feel free to leave your questions or comments in the chat window, but we also have the Q&A function. Like I mentioned just a moment ago, you can use that Q&A function to leave a question, and I'll do my best to get through all the questions at the end through our dedicated Q&A at the end of today's session. All right, so first and foremost, we'll go over today's webinar. It's going to be showcasing our new and improved user interface and user experience for Provar Automation. Super excited to bring this to you all. You may have seen glimpses of this in some of my previous sessions, but today you'll get the full kind of weight of it and be able to appreciate it, hopefully, as much as we do internally. Really what we're focused on here is providing you with a smarter and faster testing experience with Provar. I say smarter and faster as an improvement, right? So we're looking at this as an upgrade to the existing interface. Now I'll go over the agenda. It's a very short agenda. First of all, just going to provide an overview of Provar version 3 or V3. And we'll be providing you with kind of a list of some of the changes, not a comprehensive list, but you'll be able to see a lot of the kind of high-level differences at a glance, and I'll go through all those. And then, of course, it'll still be primarily focused on the demo aspect of our new interface. So I'll be showcasing the ins and outs of how do you do the basic things that you were doing in Provar today in the new interface, and also showing a lot of our new features that we've added into it that are AI-enabled. So excited to bring those to you first and foremost here today. And then lastly, we'll have our Q&A at the end, of course. So Provar Automation version 3, kind of the three key aspects of this that we've really focused on besides just usability is also our user experience, our enhanced visualization, so modernizing our interface quite heavily, providing a new clean look to it, using those nice blues that you see here from the screenshot, and I'll show you what this looks like in person as well. And then lastly, providing an updated experience on our performance for Provar Automation. So providing an upgrade in terms of our performance for the background processing of our metadata, our loading of test cases, and adding steps to Test Builder. So just kind of improvements across the board there that you'll see in this new version of Provar. So really excited to get into this today. Now, as we look through the improved usability, this is where I'll kind of showcase a lot of the highlights of what's changed in this new UX and UI for Provar Automation. Really, as I said, user experience is at the core of why we are launching this new experience. And there's a lot of different aspects of that I want to focus on today. One of the biggest ones that we really threw in here was our focus display. So the focus display really changes how we present screens and views in V3. So rather than displaying everything everywhere all at once, we really have a clear picture of what you're currently working on. So it's very focused and it's very easy to kind of get into what you're doing and not have a lot of distracting elements kind of in play there. So that's a new focus display that you'll notice in version 3 where we've kind of highlighted that. We also have a new and improved way of handling files within our test projects. So we have dedicated sections, as you'll see on the left-hand side here, for test cases, for files, which include all of our page objects, any of our custom test steps, any project files and things of that nature, data sources. Our test plans have a dedicated section now rather than just being hosted in a folder. And then we have all of our tabs for different test settings, such as our Explore tab for interacting with Salesforce records and objects, our settings for all of our preferences and creating connections and things like that. And then we have our AI assistant, which has been integrated into the product directly as well, which I'll show you how that works in just a moment. So as far as the new org browser, which I'll show off in the Explorer tab here, it has additional features such as a more focused view that you can maximize, and as well as a minimized version of that. And you can also provide additional filters rather than just a single filter to the org browser now to simplify how you're navigating to specific records within the metadata. We also have optimized our reporting and logging for Automation V3, which you'll notice in the Executions tab when I show kind of what the reporting looks like there. Much easier to navigate and tell what's going on. We have additional timestamps and start and stop durations, which you can toggle off and on in the execution window as well. And then one of the biggest things that I really wanted to showcase is our preferences menu, which allows us to handle project-related preferences at a glance. So such as changing between two different interfaces for showing your test cases, which I'll show in just a minute. And then we also have all of our project related settings, such as connecting to different proxies, VPNs, setting up your license, enabling or disabling our autosave feature, along with some other features in there as well. There's also a lot of changes in here. We've moved this toolbar here to the bottom of Provar Automation, which you'll see here in the screenshot, where you can control a lot of your things such as your browser connection, your branch that you're on with your Git repository, your testing environment. You can look at your metadata load status, and you can also access AI Assistant from directly within that toolbar as well. So there's a lot of other changes that we've made. We've kind of simplified a lot of the interactions. When you're right-clicking on elements, there's a single click rather than double click for most interactions to make that a little bit quicker and easier to use, which I'll showcase here in our demo. But let's just go ahead and hop into it. I know you could listen to me talk about it, but it's better to just see it in person. So let's go ahead and show you the first biggest change for Provar V3. We have a new icon, which is very nice, but also this new launch experience, which I'll show you. So the new launch experience shows up this window here. So if you've already used a project before, you'll have your recent access projects on the right-hand side. You'll also be able to create new projects from our brand new wizard. So if I open up here, rather than having to decide where this project is located or anything like that, the only thing you need to provide to Provar is the actual project name, and it'll allow you to create that project. Then we can import existing projects that we have on our machine, as well as importing projects directly from Git. So all this requires is a connection to our Git repository, and we can clone that to our local machine here. So very, very simple in terms of our launch experience and what we're giving you access to here, much cleaner. But let's go ahead and open up our recent project here. And I'm going to open this really quickly. Let me have my secrets password over here, because I have my projects encrypted as usual. All right, so once it's booted up, you'll notice much quicker on the boot up time there. So being able to access my existing project, provide that secrets key, and I'm already logged in and ready to begin automation on Provar. All of our windows here are resizable, so you can resize your test view window over here. You can also resize, once you have a test case open, your test palette and things of that nature. So the test palette will be over here on the right-hand side, which I can resize and control. You'll have your documentation links as usual and things of that nature. But I want to show really quickly kind of what the beginning process would look like and how that would be different in version 3 of Provar Automation. So in our settings tab, this is one of the biggest changes that we've added inside of Provar, is we have this new preferences window, which allows you to change between two different test case editors or layouts. So the single tree is my preferred view, which kind of shows you everything here, where you can see your test case folder structure and your test step editor, and then your test palette over here. And then the split tree view will kind of give you a little bit more real estate if you have a lot of test cases and you don't want to show all the steps over here. So we just given you a couple options there that you can switch between very easily. We also show you where you can connect to your license server, our network settings, raising a case with our support team, accessing all of our downloads for Provar. And then we have the autosave enable feature, which you can enable directly from this menu here. Now you'll notice, if you've ever seen Provar before, that these are all our different connection types that we normally would have had kind of giving you access through the test settings and then going into the connections tab. So we've given all of those here. So if you click on a specific connection type, such as Salesforce, you'll be able to create a new connection directly there. So if we click on Salesforce connections, we can create a normal Salesforce connection here. And I'm going to go ahead and call this DOC admin. And then I'll connect using OAuth. So I'll just select OAuth here, and I'll copy in my consumer key and my secrets, just to create a quick connection using OAuth to our Salesforce org. And then, of course, you would specify your environment if you're using a sandbox or a production and developer environment. For now, we'll just leave that as is, and we'll go ahead and connect to our production environment here. It's really a developer org. I normally do not test in production. So I'll go ahead and save this here. And of course, as usual, that creates a Salesforce connection for me to use in my testing. What happens immediately is it'll begin downloading all of the metadata for that org so that I can properly test that org inside of Provar, use that org to utilize SOQL queries and things of that nature. So all of that takes just a moment to kind of load that connection in, but once it's connected there, I can use it in my test cases. We can also use the same menu to create additional connections. So I'm going to go ahead and create one for our REST service as well. I'll create a quick connection to our weather API. I'll just give this a name here, weather API, and copy in my URL as well. And this doesn't have any authentication from here, but we can go ahead and save that. So that's just creating a new connection to an API. Typically with Provar, we talk about it being an end-to-end test automation solution. So you show you how we can connect to our Salesforce org, but also connecting to REST APIs for testing purposes is very valuable if you're doing end-to-end testing. So we can do that quickly here, create that connection that we can use in our tests. And then lastly, I'll show how we can create a UI connection inside of Provar as well. So we'll give this a name. We'll call it Provar. And this is just going to be one of our websites here. And you'll see here we also have the capability of utilizing single sign-on and MFA for our UI connections. For now, this is just an open URL, so we'll just leave that as is and click Save. Okay, so in just a matter of moments, I've created 3 different connections to our Salesforce org, to an API service, and also to a generic website. So we kind of have the full gambit of support there in terms of what we can connect to and what we can test. You'll also see database connections and different email server connections over here on the left-hand side that we can set up. So if we go to database connections, I won't do this now, but we can create various connections to databases that we support out of the box directly from within our interface here. Okay, so without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into a scenario. So let me go into our test tab here, and I'm going to create a new test case. You can do this one of 2 ways inside of our new interface. So you can right-click on a folder, and you can create a new test case directly here. And for those of you, again, that have used Provar before, you will appreciate how we've really simplified and focused our display for the right-click operation for tests and test folders. So it's just a lot easier to create and get to what you want to get to in this case. So I'll go ahead and just create a new test case using this option up here, which is our second option. Then we can specify, hey, we want to put this in the API folder. We'll call this get weather data. And then we'll specify our weather API as our connection type. We're not going to launch test builder, and we'll just click finish. So this will create a new test case for us with that weather API connection already added to it. And then we can go into our test palette and add in a web request to perform an API call. So we'll use this weather API here. And then we'll go ahead and set it to a REST service. And then we need to provide our URL here. So this is going to be this one here. Get rid of that extra space, and we'll save this. And there's no header or anything like that. The API key is just built into the URL. Not really worried about anyone getting access to it. It's just a weather API. So anyhow, we can create this very quickly here. So this is just going to make a call out to a weather API. And then we can also validate that response. So we'll drag in an assertion here really quickly here, just to show you how this works. So the result is going to be our REST response status. So we get 2 variables by default from using our API integration with Provar. We can validate the response itself. So if it returns a body, either in form of JSON or HTML, but we also get the status where we can validate things like the status code. So we'll go ahead and just type in status code here. And we'll save this, and our target is going to be 200. So we're basically just making sure that this returns a 200 status code, just a very basic assertion here. I'll go ahead and resize this window so you can see what that's showing over here. But let's go ahead and run this in debug mode to see what this looks like. Now, as soon as you hit debug or run or test builder, it'll switch you over to this execution window where you can see your live test executions. This is similar to the previous interface in Provar, but we also have a way of accessing the minimized version of that down here in the bottom. So for now, this is what we've ran. So really quickly, it ran that API call. If we click on our web request here, we can see a snapshot of our variables. So I'll go ahead and expand this window so you can see what that looks like. But this is our REST response. It returned all of our weather data for where we are. So you can see, as I was saying, it's nice and sunny here in Nashville, and it's about 58 or so degrees in terms of the temperature. This is, of course, the heat index. So it feels like actually 60.1, which is quite nice. So there you go. So now you can see all of that API data parsed for you automatically inside of Provar. And then we have in our assertion step here that 200 status code that we've returned is successful. So really quickly, just showing you how you can create API tests inside of Provar as one of our use cases. But perhaps the more interesting one is testing Salesforce. So let's go ahead and jump into a use case where we would do that. So I have a test case here where I want to showcase, as well as some of our Salesforce support, another AI feature inside of Provar. So I'm going to go ahead and launch Test Builder for this particular connection here. And while this is loading up, this connection, if you've never seen Provar before, this Salesforce Connect step is a drag and drop step that we can access directly once we've created that connection that I showed you in the beginning. And that takes care of a number of things for me. If you're doing this through some other automation solution or even manually, this takes care of a lot of steps for me. It logs me in as the correct user after launching my browser. It logs me into the correct org. I can specify a specific domain if I have a custom domain. I can also specify single sign-on credentials if I'm using that to log into Salesforce. But then it's also going to take me to a particular application from our app launcher inside of Salesforce automatically. So it gets you directly to the point where you want to begin testing all in this single step. So it's very simple in terms of once you create a connection to an org, how quickly can I jump in and start building test cases? So you could see how that is working there. Now from here, for those of you that have seen Provar before, you won't notice many changes in this first step, but I will show you some of our new AI features that we've added into Test Builder. So for now, I'll just kind of show how we interact with things in the UI. Now, when you're doing a manual flow, typical process is, you have your step laid out in Excel or something like that. And it's, log in as this user, go to this app, go to this tab, click this button, type into this field, and then perform some kind of validation, right? Now in Provar, what we do is we take each of those steps that we'd be performing manually, and we have a way of automating them very easily inside of the UI directly. So that doesn't require any code or anything like that. So what I can do is I can right click on a field in the UI and click add to test case. And Provar captures that field information from our Salesforce org's metadata. So it uses the metadata from the org that I'm connected to capture things like the layout of the org, the page that I'm on, and the record type and all of that kind of information. So as this loads in here, basically what you'll need to do is set how you want to interact with this field. Now, normally Provar will give you a default interaction type that's appropriate. Since this is a button, it knows, hey, you probably want to click this element, but we can change this to a different interaction type if we wish over here. We can also add additional options such as adding screenshots and things like that, which will be embedded into the report. But for now, I'll just show you kind of how the add and do works here for adding a new test step. You'll notice it will do a quick little page refresh because it's making sure that I'm on the correct page first. And then it's actually going to perform that step in live time. Now, a lot of other automation solutions work on record and playback, so they don't actually allow you to do this kind of instant validation. What they'll have you do is you go through a whole scenario and then it plays it back for you to let you know if it's working. In this way, we're actually doing it in a live setting. So we're adding the steps and it's performing them as we go. So it's very much more intuitive and there's a lot less back and forth. Okay, and then we can select things like the record type here. So if we click on any of the radio buttons inside of this layout, you'll notice that it's actually known that, hey, we're trying to set the record type for this account field screen here. And this is the value that I've currently selected. We can change that to a different value. And of course, it'll reference the ID there instead. But let me go ahead and go back here to the account just to reset this one. And we'll just set it to account and we'll click add and do. And just to show you that we can work on any account type here, and I haven't specified anything like a field locator or anything like that to match this particular radio button. So there you go. So it's set that record type, and then we can click next, and we'll go ahead and just add and do that step there as is. And then we're taken to our new account screen where we can begin filling in the rest of our information. Now, in Provar history, one of the most requested features that we've had is some kind of form fill option. It's some way to provide all the information for a single form screen. So I'm pleased to say that we do have a way of doing this using AI today. So I'll show the view screen rather than showing the new screen here as a way of doing that. But normally what you would have to do is you right click on a particular field and click add to test case. And what you'll see is the ability to, of course, interact with individual fields from within Test Builder. So once it retrieves the field details here, we can set this value of the account name to whatever we'd like. We can pull this from another data source. We can pull it from a SOQL query or something like that. It doesn't have to be a static value in this case. So as this is loading in here. And again, I know I'm talking very quickly. If you do have any questions as they come up, please feel free to utilize that Q&A function in the Zoom window there, and I'll definitely get to those at the end of today's session. Okay, there we go. It's the first time I've interacted with this particular org, so it took a little bit of time to load in that metadata. But what you'll see here is a new feature where we've has this AI steps toggle. So if we switch that over, what this allows us to do is individually select all the fields that we want to populate, or we can select all fields and add them all in a single, basically a single step here. What this will do is this will utilize two things inside of Provar. One, it will utilize our Salesforce metadata support to provide mappings for all these fields. It will also use our test data generation that's AI based to generate randomized data for all these fields that we're mapping as individual test steps. So you can also go through here and click on each individual field and you'll see it's changing it here. So we can provide a value for that if we want to override the test data generator, or we can unselect each of these fields that we don't want to provide as an option as well. So that's kind of one of the new AI features that we have inside of Test Builder to simplify adding steps for a new screen. We also have this available on the view screen for assertions and the inline edit menu for editing records in place. So I'll show you what that looks like here. So let me go back to an existing screen here. I'm just going to go ahead and remove these other steps. Delete these. Now, if we right click on our account name and click add to test case, this is normally what you would be doing after the fact. So you would do like a validation or an assertion, as we call it in Provar. And this is where you're making sure that the information in the UI matches what you expect it to. So you would typically have this be a variable or a specific default value for pick lists or percentages or calculated fields or anything like that. So this is normally what you would use a UI assert for inside of automation. But we're basically just making sure that each of these fields has a specific value before we continue on with the rest of our flow. So as our metadata loads here, there we have it. So again, we have this AI steps feature here. So if we do this beforehand, the way that it would work again is you notice how the interaction type rather than set is now read assert. So we can change this to assert a specific value. And you could see if you were doing this manually, how long it would take to add each of these fields individually. So rather than doing it that way, I'm going to say, okay, let's just enable our AI steps. And I'll go through here and cherry pick some of these fields that we don't want to validate. So we don't need to validate maybe the address, and maybe we don't care about the industry or something like that. So we can unselect a couple of these values and just leave that as it is. So now when we click add all, what will happen in the background is we're actually utilizing OpenAI to send out a call to generate random data for each of these elements, but we're also creating individual test steps for all these UI assertions. So we'll see all of these steps get added in a matter of moments. So rather than adding mappings for each of these individually, which as you can tell may take quite a bit of time, and this is entirely a scalable solution. So it takes about the same amount of time to generate these steps as it would for 10 steps as it does for 30 steps. So very short order, we've created all these assertions. I know you may look at this and say, I don't necessarily know what these are doing. So you can go into these and you can edit them like real Provar test steps. So you can see this is our account name value and it's pulled in here. If we go to another one, like edit this one down here, we could see it's our account group. And this is an empty value, which you can see in the UI. It's just validating that it's an empty value. So what you can do is you can rename these test steps, of course. I can add in some flavor text and say, okay, this is actually asserting the account name. So we know each of these fields individually. The default name for each of these is UI assert, but you can go and you can map these and change them after the fact. What you can also do is you can change the value as I was showing you. So what you may want to do on the back end is change these to be using a variable or something like that. So right now it's set to a hard coded value. Maybe I want this to be, some variable where it's the account name that I've set somewhere else. So we can do that and we can update these test steps just like there are any other Provar test steps. But I'll go ahead and just execute some of this so you can see how it works. But basically it's just running checks on all of those fields there and validating what's in the UI. So again, very short order, we're able to utilize AI and our metadata support with Salesforce to quickly generate a host of different steps here to run all these validations. So I'm not going to run all these. I'll just go ahead and pause it here and we can move out of this. But as I said, we also have this for the inline edit and the new screen as well. So that's the last one I didn't show here. So let me just go back into our inline edit here, and I'll add this to our test case as well. Just to show you what this looks like inside a test builder, you'll see we have these AI steps here. We can check that. And you'll see here, it actually loads in only the fields that it should. So if there's a field like number of employees, which is calculated, you'll notice that field won't be loaded over here because it knows that's a calculated field. So there's no reason to edit that field. Now, this is actually good for exploratory testing. What you can do is you can randomize these using AI. So I can select a couple of these fields. Again, I'm not going to do anything with the contact and the industry or anything like that. And we can unselect a couple of these just to show you. But if I add all here, this will actually add multiple steps for me. It'll add the inline edit interaction, and it's also going to add all of the steps to basically generate randomized data for each of these fields. So when I say it's good for exploratory testing, you could use this in a lot of different scenarios where you want to test whether or not a field or a record can support all the different variations that you would do through a user. So rather than having to go through each of those manually, I can quickly do it using AI, and it's going to go ahead and add in steps to map each of these fields individually and also randomize the data for every single one of them. And then once it executes, you'll see kind of what it looks like there. So this one takes a moment or two, but it's still going to be a lot faster than mapping each of these fields individually. So you can kind of see how that works there. I'm getting a lot of questions coming in through the chat, which is great. Not quite done with the demo yet, but while this is loading, maybe I can go ahead and switch over and show some of those questions here. So we have a question. There's a lot in the chat, but I'm going to look at the Q&A first here. So using unique ID, can we set up alphanumeric characters? But if I want to add 3 to 5 numbers, then how to do in Builder? Yes, so we have a way of generating unique IDs in Provar, and you can do this using specifically numbers, specifically letters, or both. You just need to specify that as a second parameter, basically. You should be able to find that in our documentation as well, where you can do that. We have another question here. So for example, in the account page layout, how can we make sure all fields which are required are present through Provar? If you meet in the AI supported stuff, the required fields will, of course, be there, but if you don't select them and don't if you save the record without providing a required field, then you'll get a standard Salesforce error there. So it'll stop you from doing that. So in other words, you can't do anything through Provar that you wouldn't be able to do manually inside of Salesforce. Okay, I promise I'll get back to questions. That was just a bit of a segue just to kind of kill time there, but you can see all of our steps have been generated over here, and you can see all the data that it's using for each of these fields too. It's completely random using that AI support. So it's able to basically just randomize a lot of these elements. So I can see here, it set the account name to the correct value, but if I go ahead and step through here, it's activated the inline edit for me, which is already active, but it adds that as a step just in case. And you'll kind of see it go through here and just randomly change these values. So again, all in a single step rather than having to map each of these individually. And using the test data generation, we're able to kind of provide some variance of the data there. And what's even more interesting is being able to provide record relationship. So you see how it selected an existing record there. So it's smart enough to know, okay, find an existing record in our org rather than try to go in through the process of creating a new contact or creating a new account group. So it finds an existing record at random and provides that as well. So very easy to do now in the new test builder with our AI supported generation of test steps. So I hope you enjoyed that. Again, this is available on the new screen. It's available on the view screen and then also on this inline edit menu as well for Salesforce layouts. So I've shown that quite a bit here, but I was pretty excited to bring that to you all today. So I did want to spend some time in that environment. So I'm going to switch back over to Provar Automation and show a quick example of some of our other AI features that we can utilize, as well as some additional features that I wanted to show you inside of E3. I'm just going to go ahead and delete these other steps here and save our test case. Okay, so for the image validation that we have here, you'll notice in the test palette, if I scroll down here, I have a couple of different functions that I can use. So I have our test step generator. I have our generation of test data, which is already in the product today. We also have our image validation and utterance generator, which we can use to generate utterances for AI prompts and things like that. If you're not familiar with prompt engineering and things like that, this will kind of help you craft those prompts to make your AI a little bit more accurate in terms of how it responds. But let me show some examples of one of my favorite new features is this custom test step generator. This gets a little bit more into an advanced use case, but for a lot of our users, longtime Provar users, they end up with a very niche scenario where they need to write a custom snippet of code to do a specific thing that we don't provide out of the box. Now, I will say this is very, very rare. It doesn't come up often. However, having the ability to do that gives you a lot of flexibility with the platform. So we give you access to the backend Java so you can create your own custom test steps if you wish. But let's say you need to do that and you don't know how to write code. There's not really a way to do that today. You would have to reach out through our support. You would have to go through the correct channels or something like that. And kind of what it would look like is basically, let me go back to the way that you would do it today is you would have a play with ChatGPT. So here I'm going to kind of walk through a scenario and show you what this gives me versus what we provide you in Provar. So let's say I want to try to do this today. I'm going to give it a prompt. I'm going to be very specific. So I'm say, hey, can you generate a custom test step to be used in Provar Automation? The test step could convert basically a phone formatter. So I want to give a 10-digit number and I want to format it as a phone number. This is for US phone numbers, of course. So I'll go ahead and send that to ChatGPT and see what it responds with. Now, the response could be different every time. Sometimes it's returned an Apex code to me, which of course would not be portable to Provar. Sometimes it does return Java. I didn't actually specify the language here. It does look like it's using Java here, which is great. I'm assuming it's pulling that from somewhere in our documentation online. But it gives me something that you may think, oh, well, this looks like it could work. The only problem is ChatGPT only has a very limited knowledge of our actual, backend, what we can and can't support through code and what annotations and variables and things like that are actually supported. So you may try to use this and try to get this working, and it's going to take a lot of back and forth. It's not going to immediately compile. Some of these annotations may be incorrect. And as we know, anyone who's used ChatGPT or AI and for any purpose, you know that it sometimes is very confidently incorrect. So it may give you a response and you think, oh, it's a coding wizard. But this is not going to be portable into Provar directly. So rather than doing it this way, we actually have a custom test step generator built in to Provar that allows you to give it a prompt and it generates a test step and it's automatically in your project already. So you can compile it immediately and drag and drop it and use it as you wish. So I'll show you a quick example of what that looks like. So I have that same prompt here. I'll go ahead and disable these other guys here. But I have that same prompt here. And basically how I've added this is in our new Provar AI section, you'll have your custom test step generator. I've just dragged that into my test case over here. And then I've given it a prompt and say, this is the same thing basically that I gave to ChatGPT, except I'm not specifying Provar Automation because our our custom test step generator knows that I want this for test automation. So it has knowledge of Provar and it has context and all of those things. So we've already trained it to be able to do this. And then we just give it a name. Basically, this is what we want to call our custom test step whenever we use it. So let's go ahead and run this really quickly. And I'll also show you while this is kind of running, we have our additional filters over here inside of our test executor that show you how you can enable different levels of output and start end times, test step durations, which is great for monitoring how long test cases are actually taking to execute. Of course, all this will be available in the report. You'll see that there, but just to kind of show you our enhanced logging that we have in V3. Okay, so it takes about 20 seconds, give or take, to generate those custom APIs because it's sending it to our OpenAI integration, and then it's coming back with a response. So pretty normal there. But we could see here it's created a test step where it's saved it to our file system. And we can see here it's generated successfully in our variables. So if we go over to our test now, and let me just go ahead and do a quick refresh and recompile. And if we scroll up in just a moment, once this has recompiled, we now see in our custom section, we have that convert phone number test step ready for us to use. So just like that, we've generated a custom test step using AI, and it's ready to drag and drop into a test case. Here's my input. So let's go ahead and test it for less than 10 digits to see if it has any kind of error handling. And we'll go ahead and test it for 5555555. Too long. So let's do that scenario. And then let's do the correct scenario that it's expecting. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 0. There we go. And I'll set this to phone number short, phone number, and then phone number long, just so we know what that looks like in the output. Okay. So we have 3 different scenarios where we're testing this new custom test step that we've generated. So I'm going to run this in debug mode just to show you what it looks like. So you'll see the first one fails. And if we expand this, it failed intentionally because the input number must be exactly 10 digits. So we see that show up there. Now we have it paused. And if we continued on, we'll also see that the long one failed for the same reason. And the short one did pass. And we see here in the variables tab, the output is correct. So first try there, it generated a custom test step to convert any phone number or any value to this format that we can use for testing purposes. So something that previously in Provar, you'd have to kind of figure out how to convert, text and strings and things like that. We can create an API to do virtually anything inside of Provar now using this new test step generator. So very, very handy and useful for those kinds of cases. You'll also see here I have a couple others that I've been playing around with, so we could do things like comparing Salesforce IDs of like 15 and 18 digits. We can do a test counter. So I actually like this one. I'll show off this really quickly because I like this scenario as well, where I can basically generate a test step that's going to count the number of test cases in my project. We could use this for auditing purposes to know, just kind of scaling how our testing process is going. Of course, you can do all this inside of our Salesforce application inside of Provar Manager as well, but pretty handy to be able to do this directly in the product. So I'm just generating a quick test step to do that. And of course, this is a very simple scenario where I'm telling how many test cases it has. But you could see here the applications for this are virtually limitless where we could do this. So we do a quick refresh again here. And in the custom section, this is where these default to. But it's worth noting in the test palette, you can create your own sections. You can name them whatever you like. You can organize these. So here we have our Provar test case counter. So I'll drag that in here. And I'll just save this to a variable, test count, and save it and just go ahead and execute it. And there we have it. So it's telling me, oh, okay, you have 9 test cases. So I can quickly verify that, of course, if I go into here and see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. So there we have 10 test cases exactly, or sorry, 9 test cases exactly. So it's correctly done that on the first try once again. So that's great that that works. And we can see all that inside of Provar now. So custom test step generation is very, very useful for those kinds of edge cases where you don't have the native support that we can provide through Provar. We can also set up various connectors to unsupported databases and things like that. So you'll see here, I actually have added one for MongoDB connector because that's not something that we necessarily support out of the box or a database connection. But I created a custom API inside of Provar that does that for me. So now I can connect to Mongo database using this test step. So again, the applications here are virtually limitless to what we can and cannot do using that very quickly AI supported feature. So let me go ahead and show off our validation of our images as well, because this is a very handy thing that I think will become more and more useful as we get into Experience Cloud and community sites and just verifying different things on different personas and profiles and things like that. So here I have my Provar connection, which I'm going to drag and drop into my test case over here because I want to go to the Provar website. And what I want to do is I'll launch this inside of Test Builder so we can see it being executed. And I'll just set a quick pause here. So I'll toggle a breakpoint. And what this will do, this UI Connect will log into that Provar URL that I specified. So it's just going to this URL here. And I basically just want to verify this image is correct. So in our description here, if I go to the description, you can see the description is the image shows a smiling woman holding a laptop, and it kind of describes that image. So the description should match in this case. And basically what we're doing is we're extracting the URL of that image, and then we're passing it to our image validator test step here, where it's going to send the image URL and the description off to an AI, and it's going to validate that those match. So let me just go ahead and resume here. And if everything goes correctly, that should come back, and we should see our assertion does pass. Brilliant. So everything checks off there. The image is successful. And just to show you if this is wrong, so we can change this to say, okay, instead of a man, this is now a woman. So we'll save and do that, and then we'll just resume it here. And now we see that it's failed. So the description no longer matches the image as displayed on the screen. So this is great. So the image validation is actually pretty smart in picking up on subtle things in your description and what you pass to it. So it's only as good as the information that you provide. But we can see here how that would be used in a various number of use cases where you're wanting to validate images contain certain content that may be dynamic, right? You may not want to validate the actual base 64 image, or the actual schema or the color or anything like that. You just want to know that the content is roughly correct, and using AI to do that is the best way. So we have that built into the tool as well. So I've shown you a couple of different things. I do want to have a little bit of a recap here because I've talked for quite a while, and I do want to jump into our Q&A as well. But I know you all have a ton of questions. So just to quickly recap, what we've covered is the new interface for Provar version 3, kind of give you some highlights there. I have not shown the assistant yet, but I will kind of show you what that looks like as well. But we've shown how we can generate custom test steps from within Test Builder, how we can generate custom test APIs to be used for various number of use cases, how we can validate images, and then also how we can connect to APIs, Salesforce, and web services and things like that. So the AI assistant being integrated this is what it looks like over here. If you're familiar with Provar Assistant, it's just embedded into the platform now. So we can ask it, a basic question like, how can I create a test case in Provar Automation? So it's just kind of a way of embedding this into the platform. So if you're just getting started with Provar, whether you're on V2 or you're new to V3 and you just want to know how to do something like this, it tells you, walks you through step by step. It gives you some context on how to do that. So there you go. That's how you create a new test case. So it gives you a walkthrough on how to do that. And then, of course, that's just embedded there. We also have a mini window of it down here where you can open that. But we can still navigate to our different windows here inside of V3. So you'll see that focus display there. Okay. So there's a lot more that I could show you all, and I'm really excited about all the new things that are in version 3. If you've never seen it before, we're really, really proud of this, and we've been working very hard. But I do want to jump into our questions now to make sure that we cover all of those. So let's jump now to our Q&A. And I'm going to try my best to get through these as fast as possible because I know we have a lot of questions. Thank you all so much. Okay, so first question here in the Q&A, how these changes are going to impact the existing Provar structure in our test cases, or what necessary steps we have to follow if we move to Provar v3. The answer is you just need to open up the project in the new version of Provar and you're good to go. Yeah, there's no structure changes. We've just kind of presented it in a different way. So the test project structure will be the same behind the scenes. All the test cases will be laid out in the same way. And you can actually go back and forth between version 2 and version 3 without impacting your projects. So if you have team members that are on V2 and other team members that are on V3, they can collaborate. There's no restriction there. So backwards compatible, all that good stuff. Question here on performance testing. We get this one just about every time. So how to use Provar for performance testing, capture the load times for individual components on homepage of Experience Cloud portal. So we can capture load times using, the test step duration counters that are already built into Provar's test steps. You'll notice that in the reporting. And so you can report on how long a particular page takes to load. If you want to know for experience purposes, user experience, how long objects take to load, pages and things like that. And you can report on them. And what I didn't show you is you can also add different SLAs and tags to your test cases to say, here's the expected duration that this particular section of a test should take, and here's the maximum. And if it goes over that limit, it will actually show up in the report as well. So you can generate a report that shows you all that information. Hopefully that answers that question. Does the AI form filling and assertion work only on Salesforce, or can it be used in other web applications as well? Great question. For now, it is limited to Salesforce layouts. I'll just leave it at that. Will it capture for custom fields? Yes. The use case that I showed you all was actually a very custom financial services org that has custom fields in it. So you can see all of that there, and all those work out of the box because, again, they're pulled from that metadata. This is a good one, and definitely one that I thought we would get. When is the new UI GA date? We will say Q4 for now. We are expecting that to be released sometime in Q4. So be on the lookout for us at TDX as well, where we'll be demoing V3. If you are in San Francisco, you can catch us next week and we can talk more about it there. But expect it to come to you soon in Q4. Same question here on the custom fields. We answered that one. When you use AI random data generation, will new random data be generated on each test run, or is the random data static? Great question. So whenever you actually generate the test steps, that's when the data is randomized. Then those test steps can be modified after the fact to be changed, but the data will be static once they've been generated, but you can always go back and regenerate it in Test Builder. We have someone here asking about the Test Builder icons available in the top Test Builder panel. There's so much to get to in version 3, and I know that there was a lot of changes that we're all noticing. I'm sorry I wasn't able to highlight everything. I can quickly just recall for you, in Test Builder, you have the Nitro X toggle where you can disable and enable Nitro X there, and you'll have the Nitro X menu where you can create and modify your existing packages and components. Then you have your test palette icon where you can open up the test palette embedded in Test Builder. And then lastly, you just have the pin option where you can unpin different test sessions. A question here, would the new version of Provar make it easier to automate custom objects? And how does this new version affect our existing test cases setup? I'm not entirely sure what you mean by automating custom objects. There's nothing really changing in terms of our mapping or anything like that in this version. This is largely a user experience and UI update. So you won't notice a lot of changes as far as mappings and things of that nature, but we are making improvements to those, of course, iteratively. I will say, again, the version does not affect your existing test cases or your setup or your project files or anything like that. Here's a question. Will the console now move with the step it is currently executing? I have lots of tests that are large, and I've noticed that the console never moves and just remains at the first step. I manually move traverse through the console. I'm assuming you mean the execution window inside of Provar Automation. So it actually does auto expand and follow along with the test. So really quickly, just an illustration. So if I go back to where's my session from before this one here? So as this executes, it would expand like an on-screen here, and it would expand your set steps. And then once they're completed, it would collapse those back down and then go to the next one. So it does automatically follow along as it's executing inside of this execution window. It does do that. If that's the question, then yes. Where is the image AI validator hosted? So we're utilizing a connection through OpenAI. We're using an API to connect to it. Right now, it's our own pre-built, trained model to do this. It's currently not GA. It is going to be an add-in feature for now, but we will have that available sometime in the near future. Can Provar compare contents inside of two Word documents? Great question. So we can extract data from documents. We can read various different data sources. It depends on what you're trying to compare inside of this Word document. If you're doing text and things like that, usually we can extract those text values and then compare them once we've extracted both. If it's an image or something like that, it would be a little bit more complex. Can you show how it looks in the new Provar to commit, push, pull, and create branches? I can show you not all of those things, but I could show you some of it. Inside of version 3, you'll have your Git window down here at the bottom. Initially, it won't show anything because you won't be connected to a version control system. But once you are connected, you can open up and resize this window, of course. And it'll show you which branch you're on. You can switch here to a different branch. And you can also check for remote changes. So this is basically doing your pull operation. You can pull changes. And then we have our windows that were already there where you can show all of your branches and repository settings here. You have your Git staging window, which is the same as before. We just kind of minimized like what we're providing in terms of what is useful inside of Provar. So rather than having access to all these different settings that you may never use, we've really trimmed it down and made it easier to use and simplified this functionality for Git. So you'll see all the kind of the same basic things are still inside of the product there. Most important question, is that a map of Middle Earth behind you? Yes, it is. Thank you for noticing. When will V3 be released? Q4. Do you have any documentation on the security of the AI integration? LLMs used, information for training, prompts, etc. We have very strict HIPAA compliance rules. Yes, we can definitely work with you on providing specific documentation that you may require for your compliance regulations. We'd be happy to provide that offline for sure. Okay, so that's all the questions in the Q&A. I know there were some chats as well. I may not be able to get through all this because I'm having to scroll up here quite a bit in the chat. I think a lot of these were asked again in the Q&A, but I'm just kind of parsing through here to see what we have. We had a question. Oh, this is a good one. Since we have the option to connect to production environments, UI and database, should we clear this first by security? So great question. So because Provar is a local installation, you only have the capability to connect to what you already have the capability to connect to. So we're not giving you any additional access or anything like that. So if you have credentials to your production environment and that credential is an administrator for that org, then you can create a connection for it in Provar Automation. Absolutely. There's no restriction there, but it does have to be a certain profile and it has to have certain permissions in order to connect from Provar. So that is a limitation. But as far as the database side of things, same answer goes. If you're connecting to a database, then if you already have those credentials, you can create a connection inside of Provar without any restrictions there. Okay. Any specific operation when it comes to migrate V2 to V3 for desktop as on server side? Smooth. Yeah. For what I've noticed, I've opened projects in V2 and V3. No changes. Again, we're just presenting your project in a different way. So all the backend is the same. File structure, project structure, exactly the same. No changes there. Can we connect with external open source APIs? Great question. So we can work with you on your specific use case. I'll say that for now. Our new AI features are very much cutting edge, so we are iterating on them. So if you have a specific use case, we'd love to hear more about that, so we can work it into the product. But yeah, be happy to hear more about that one. Which external open source API you may have in mind, if it's DeepSeek or something like that. Where did you launch Test Builder from? Great question. So inside of your test menu, the same way as before, you can right click on a test case and you can run a test, start a test builder session. So you had this before in version 2, but you can also launch it from the top here. So you'll have your test builder session up here. And if anything's currently clicked or being used or highlighted, it'll have a little pink. So for example, if I make a change to a test case, you'll notice that the save button is now pink. So we have that highlighting there. Okay. Can you explain the object identification mechanism utilized in Provar? That is a very interesting question. I will say metadata. We utilize the Salesforce metadata to determine which layout is being presented on the screen, which record you're interacting with, and all of that. So it's able to determine based on the layout, what you're interacting with, which object is identifying there. So metadata APIs is the short answer. Experience Cloud is desktop app or it's being accessed from browser. So Experience Cloud is the name of my project. The application I was showing you all is Provar Automation, and it is a desktop application. AI Assistant is built-in functionality, requires some additional permissions apart from what Provar may currently require additional assessments if the application goes through an inside company security process, data sharing, for example. Yeah, great question. Again, any specific documentation that you may be looking for as far as our usage of AI and security requirements, we'd be happy to work with you offline to kind of communicate those and provide those as necessary. Can you do the same thing to validate field under the life events tab on your account record? Not sure what that question was for there. It may have been contextual, so I apologize. I may have to just glaze over that one for now. Can you create a record using SOQL query instead of clicking on the new button? Absolutely. You have drag and drop support for SOQL query inside of Provar. So once you have a connection to an org, you go into your Explorer tab, you go into your connection that you're looking for, you search for account, for example, and then you can drag and drop that into your test case to use a SOQL query. Can I create all these asserts with a proper name? Else it's time consuming to navigate to their assert I want. Yeah, this is a great bit of feedback here for us. We are constantly, as I said, iterating over our new AI features. So that's a good bit of feedback there. Will it fill in random values for fields through AI steps? It fills in random values whenever you're creating new records or you're editing existing ones. But if you're doing assertions, it's doing the values as they are. Another question here. What if I wanted to test different sets of data to fill in the fields? Will it take ages to load? No, the load time is entirely based on the turnaround that we're getting from the AI integration. So it is scalable from our testing. What we've seen is it takes about the same time if you're automating and filling in 10 fields as it does for 100 fields. So it is highly scalable in that sense. Another question on the data it's using. Yes, it is using the same data every time because those test steps are generated and they're static. Which version of Provar has the AI option? This is in version 3, so it will be in the new version. You'll see that there. What if I wanted to test different sets of data? We already talked about that. Auto healing. There's a question here. Is auto healing an option available for the objects which are added through AI? The auto healing that we use, or self healing as it's normally called in test automation and Provar, is actually based on metadata. So if your fields move around to a different section or change label or anything like that, they're actually going to not affect the execution of that particular test case. And I'm at the hour. I know there's a lot of questions coming in here. I will promise to get through all those in a follow-up, but we are going to have to cut things off. So I'm going to go ahead and jump to these last two questions in the Q&A. And then for the last remaining questions, we will respond to you, I promise. So we'll get back to those after the fact. Lastly, and not least, V3 will be available in Q4, so you'll be able to see and get your hands on these features firsthand. You can also catch us next week at TDX. And thank you all so much for coming. I hope you enjoyed today's session. And as always, have a great rest of your day. I've been Michael Daly, and this is Provar V3.